Have you ever been judged so harshly that you felt like the ground should just swallow you whole? Have you ever stood in a place where you clearly didn't belong, feeling every eye burning into your skin, seeing disgust written across faces that looked at you like you were nothing more than dirt on their expensive shoes? Well, let me tell you about the day that changed everything for me. The day when I walked into the Grand Riviera Hotel with torn sneakers, a stained jacket, and desperation, clinging to me like a second skin. I was just 14 years old, but in that moment, standing in that marble lobby with crystal chandeliers hanging above my head like judgmental eyes, I felt ancient, worn down by a life that had already given me more struggles than most adults face in a lifetime. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is that I was invisible to most people. Just another poor kid from the wrong side of town. Someone who society had already decided wasn't worth their time or compassion. But that day, that one singular day in October, everything I thought I knew about human nature, about kindness, about the masks people wear, was about to be shattered into a million pieces. I remember the exact moment I pushed through those heavy glass doors, the whoosh of artificially cooled air hitting my face, carrying with it the scent of expensive perfume, fresh flowers, and something else, something that smelled like money, like privilege, like a world I had only ever seen on television screens through shop windows as I walked past, my stomach growling, my feet aching in shoes that were 2 sizes too small because they were hand-me-downs from a neighbor's kid who had outgrown them 3 years ago. The floor beneath my feet wasn't just clean, it was gleaming, polished to such perfection that I could see my own reflection staring back at me, and what I saw made my heart sink even deeper into my chest. I looked exactly like what I was. A kid who didn't belong, whose presence in this palace of wealth and luxury was an affront to everything it represented. My jeans had a hole in the left knee, not the fashionable kind that rich kids paid extra for, but the genuine kind that came from falling on concrete, from wearing the same pair day after day because there were no others. My jacket, a faded navy blue windbreaker that had once belonged to my father before he left us, before he decided that the weight of poverty was too heavy to carry, and disappeared into the night 7 years ago, hung on my thin frame like a deflated balloon. My hair, which I had tried desperately to comb down with water from a public restroom fountain just 10 minutes before entering, was already starting to rebel, sticking up in places, unruly and wild, announcing to everyone that I was someone who couldn't afford a proper haircut, someone whose mother cut his hair in the kitchen with dull scissors, while he sat on a wobbly wooden chair and tried not to cry about the kids at school who had mocked him that day. But I wasn't there because I wanted to be. I wasn't there to rob the place or cause trouble like the security guard who was now watching me with narrowed eyes seemed to think. I was there because I had no other choice. Because sometimes life backs you into a corner so tight that you have to do things that terrify you, things that make your hands shake and your voice tremble, things that require you to walk into places where you know you're not wanted and beg for help from people who have made careers out of looking down on others. The receptionist, and I'll never forget her face as long as I live, was a woman in her mid-30s with perfectly coiffed blonde hair pulled back into a tight bun that looked like it was giving her a permanent facelift, her makeup applied with precision, her navy blue suit pressed with creases so sharp they could cut paper, her name tag gleaming gold against her lapel reading, Patricia Morrison, Senior Guest Relations Manager, in elegant script. She was beautiful in that cold, untouchable way that some people are, like a porcelain doll behind glass, something to admire from a distance but never to touch, never to approach unless you were worthy. And I, with my poverty written all over me like graffiti on a wall, was definitely not worthy in her eyes. I approached that massive marble reception desk, each step feeling like I was walking through quicksand, my heart hammering so hard against my ribs that I was sure everyone in that lobby could hear it, could hear the panic, the fear, the absolute terror of what I was about to do. My throat was dry, my palms were sweating, and there was a voice in my head, my mother's voice, weak and fading, telling me that I had to do this, that I had to be brave, that sometimes being brave doesn't mean being strong, it means being terrified and doing it anyway. The desk was so tall that I had to stand on my tiptoes to see over it properly. And that detail, that small humiliating detail, seemed to amuse Patricia Morrison in a way that made her lips curl into something that wasn't quite a smile, but more like the expression you'd make when you found something unpleasant on the bottom of your shoe. I can still hear my own voice, small and shaky, as I said those words that took every ounce of courage I possessed. "Excuse me, ma'am. I need to use your phone, please. It's an emergency." The silence that followed felt like it lasted an eternity, like the entire universe had paused to watch this moment, to see what would happen when someone like me dared to ask something from someone like her. Her eyes, pale blue and cold as winter ice, traveled slowly from my face down to my worn-out shoes and back up again, taking inventory of every flaw, every sign of poverty, every indication that I didn't belong in her pristine world. When she finally spoke, her voice was crisp and sharp, dripping with a disdain that was almost palpable, almost physical in the way it hit me. "Our phones are for hotel guests only," she said, each word enunciated with perfect clarity, as if she was speaking to someone very stupid or very foreign, or perhaps both. "Are you a guest at this establishment?" She already knew the answer, of course. She could see it as clearly as I could, but she wanted to hear me say it, wanted to watch me admit that I was nobody, that I had no right to be standing there, breathing the same air as her paying customers. I swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at the corners of my eyes, but I refused to let them fall, refused to give her that satisfaction. "No, ma'am, I'm not a guest. But please, this is really important. My mother, she's sick, and I need to make a call. Just one call. It won't take long, I promise." I hated how desperate I sounded, hated the way my voice cracked on the word mother, hated that I had to beg. But what choice did I have? My mother was at home, alone, and her condition had deteriorated so rapidly that morning that I had been forced to leave her, to run through the streets looking for help, any kind of help, because our phone had been disconnected 3 months ago when we couldn't pay the bill, because the neighbors who usually let us use theirs weren't home, because the phone on our corner had been vandalized and broken, its receiver dangling uselessly from a cut cord. Patricia Morrison's expression didn't change, didn't soften even a fraction, and in that moment, I realized that there are people in this world who have built such high walls around their hearts that nothing can penetrate them. Not a child's tears, not a story of suffering, not even basic human compassion. "I'm sorry," she said, though her tone made it abundantly clear that she wasn't sorry at all. "But that's our policy. We can't have random people coming in off the street using our facilities. I'm sure you understand. Now, if you're not going to book a room, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We have actual guests who need assistance." The way she said "actual guests" felt like a slap across my face, each word carefully chosen to remind me of my place, or rather, my lack of one. I stood there frozen, my mind racing, trying to figure out what to do next, where to go, how to save my mother when every door seemed to be slamming shut in my face. The security guard, a large man with arms like tree trunks and a suspicious glare that had been fixed on me since I entered, started moving in my direction, his hand resting on the radio clipped to his belt, ready to call for backup if this poor kid caused any trouble. That's when something inside me shifted, some combination of desperation and determination that overrode my fear, my shame, my instinct to just turn around and run away. "Please," I said again, louder this time, my voice carrying across the lobby, causing a few well-dressed guests to turn and stare, their faces registering shock that someone like me was still standing there, still insisting, still refusing to disappear quietly. "I just need to make one phone call, that's all, just one call, and then I'll leave. I swear you'll never see me again." Patricia Morrison's face flushed red. Whether from anger or embarrassment at the scene I was creating, I couldn't tell, but her voice when she spoke next was like ice, like venom designed to wound, to humiliate, to put me firmly back in my place. "Have you ever been made to feel so small, so worthless that you questioned your own right to exist?" That's exactly how I felt in that moment, standing in that gleaming lobby, surrounded by luxury I could never afford, facing a woman who looked at me like I was something disgusting, something that needed to be removed before I contaminated her perfect world. Growing up poor isn't just about lacking money, though that's certainly a huge part of it. It's about the way people look at you, the way teachers assume you won't amount to anything, the way shopkeepers follow you around their stores like you're about to steal something, the way other kids make jokes about your clothes, your shoes, the fact that you sometimes come to school with the same lunch 3 days in a row because that's all there is in the house. It's about learning to be invisible, to take up as little space as possible, to never ask for anything because you already know the answer will be no. My mother tried her best, and I need you to understand that. She tried so incredibly hard to give me a normal childhood despite everything working against us. She worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 when she could get the shifts, Cleaning offices at night, working at a laundromat during the day, taking in sewing repairs on weekends, her fingers constantly moving, constantly working, bleeding sometimes from needle pricks, cramping from the repetitive motions but never stopping, never complaining, always with a smile for me when I came home from school, always asking about my day, always making sure I did my homework even when she was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open. We lived in a tiny apartment on the 4th floor of a building that should have been condemned years ago, where the elevator never worked, where the heat barely functioned in winter, where you could hear every argument, every cry, every moment of despair from the families living around us because the walls were paper thin. Our apartment had one bedroom that my mother insisted I take while she slept on a couch that had been old when she got it from someone's curb 15 years ago, a kitchen so small that only one person could stand in it at a time, and a bathroom where the pipes groaned and complained every time you turned on the water. But my mother made it home. She hung cheerful yellow curtains that she'd sewn herself from fabric remnants. She kept everything as clean as she possibly could despite the building's best efforts to remain filthy. She filled our small space with love, even when there wasn't enough food to fill our stomachs. I learned to be grateful for what we had because I saw families who had even less. Kids who slept in cars, people who lined up at shelters for meals, families torn apart by addictions and violence, and the crushing weight of poverty that seemed to multiply problems rather than just create them. My mother taught me that being poor didn't mean being worthless, that dignity wasn't something you could buy, that character was built in hard times, not easy ones. She would tell me stories as I fell asleep, stories about my grandmother who had been a teacher in another country before circumstances brought our family to America with nothing but hope and determination. Stories about ancestors who had survived wars and famines and persecutions. Stories meant to remind me that I came from strong people, resilient people, people who didn't give up even when everything seemed impossible. But stories don't fill empty stomachs, and hope doesn't pay for medicine, and strength alone can't prevent your mother from getting sick when she's worked herself to the bone, when she's gone without proper meals so that her son could eat, when she's ignored her own health problems for years because there was no money for doctors, no insurance to cover treatments, no safety net to catch her when she inevitably fell. I watched her get thinner over the years, watched her energy fade, watched her movements become slower, more painful, though she tried to hide it from me, tried to pretend everything was fine even when I could see in her eyes that it wasn't. I was 12 when I started working too. Nothing legal, of course, because who's going to officially hire a 12-year-old? But I found ways to make money, running errands for neighbors, helping the corner store owner unload deliveries before school, collecting bottles and cans to recycle, doing anything and everything I could to contribute, to ease the burden on my mother who was literally killing herself to keep us afloat. School became secondary to survival, though my mother would have been furious if she knew I was cutting classes to work. So I learned to be strategic, to maintain just enough attendance and grades to not draw attention, to fly under the radar while my real education was happening on the streets, learning how to negotiate, how to spot opportunities, how to survive in a world that wasn't designed for people like us. The morning it all fell apart started like any other, with me waking up at 5:30 to the sound of my mother's alarm, the one she used for her early shift at the laundromat, except this time there was no sound of her moving around the apartment, no smell of the cheap instant coffee she always made, no gentle knock on my door telling me to get ready for school. I called out to her once, twice, and when she didn't answer, something cold and terrible settled in my chest, that instinct you get when you just know something is horribly wrong. I found her still on the couch, but she wasn't sleeping. She was conscious but barely, her skin pale and clammy, her breathing shallow and labored, her eyes unfocused when she tried to look at me. She tried to speak, tried to tell me she was fine, but the words came out slurred and weak, and I knew with absolute certainty that this was it. This was the moment I had been dreading for years, the moment when my mother's body finally gave out from the years of overwork and stress and sacrifice. I tried our phone first, grabbing it from the receiver and pressing it to my ear, but the dead silence on the other end confirmed what I already knew. We had no service. The phone was just a useless piece of plastic because we couldn't afford to keep it connected. I ran to Mrs. Chen's apartment across the hall, but she didn't answer my frantic knocking, and I remembered that she had mentioned visiting her daughter upstate for the week. I tried 2 more neighbors, but one wasn't home and the other, Mr. Rodriguez, had a phone, but it was out of order, he explained apologetically. Something about unpaid bills and service interruptions. The same story that plagued half our building. My mother needed an ambulance, needed help immediately, but how do you call for help when you have no way to make a call? I ran down to the street, my heart pounding, my mind racing through options. The payphone on the corner was broken, vandalized by kids who thought it was funny to destroy one of the few remaining public phones in the neighborhood. I had seen it yesterday and cursed silently, but hadn't thought much of it because I never imagined I'd need it so desperately. I ran 3 blocks to the next payphone, my lungs burning, my legs pumping as fast as they could carry me. But when I got there was a homeless man passed out against it, and when I tried to use it anyway, I discovered it too was broken, the coin slot jammed, the buttons unresponsive. Panic was setting in now. Real panic, the kind that makes your hands shake and your vision blur and your thoughts scatter like startled birds. I knew I couldn't leave my mother alone for too long, but I also knew that if I didn't find help soon, if I didn't get her to a hospital, I might lose her forever. And that thought, that possibility, was so terrifying that it threatened to paralyze me completely. That's when I remembered the Grand Riviera Hotel. I had passed it countless times on my way to various odd jobs, had stared at its magnificent facade, its doormen in crisp uniforms, its revolving doors that led to a world I could only imagine. It was 6 blocks away, but I ran those 6 blocks faster than I had ever run in my life, my chest heaving, my throat raw, my mind fixed on a single goal: get to a phone, call for help, save my mother. I didn't think about how I looked, didn't think about whether they would let me in, didn't think about anything except the image of my mother's pale face and labored breathing, the way her hand had felt cold when I squeezed it before leaving, the way she had whispered, "Go get help, baby, go," with what seemed like the last of her strength. So there I stood, facing Patricia Morrison's cold disdain, the security guard approaching, well-dressed guests staring at me like I was some kind of spectacle, some entertainment to break up their boring morning, and I realized that this wasn't just about making a phone call anymore. This was about whether I mattered, whether my mother's life mattered, whether people like us deserved basic human kindness, or if we were just obstacles to be removed from the sight of those more fortunate. Patricia Morrison opened her mouth to say something else, probably to order the security guard to remove me, but I spoke first, my voice steadier now, fueled by desperation and anger and a kind of recklessness that comes when you have absolutely nothing left to lose. "My mother is dying," I said, and the lobby seemed to go even quieter if that was possible, every conversation stopping, every movement freezing, as if time itself was holding its breath. "She's at home alone right now and she can't breathe properly and she needs an ambulance, but I have no way to call one because our phone doesn't work, and I've tried every payphone in the neighborhood, and none of my neighbors are home, and I don't know what else to do, so I came here to this hotel, because I hoped, that maybe someone here would have enough compassion, enough basic human decency, to let a kid make one phone call to save his mother's life." My voice cracked on the last word and I felt hot tears finally spilling down my cheeks, but I didn't wipe them away, didn't try to hide them, because maybe, just maybe, if this woman saw how desperate I was, if she saw that I wasn't just some troublemaker but a scared kid trying to save the only person in the world who loved him, maybe she would change her mind. But Patricia Morrison's expression remained unchanged, her jaw set, her eyes hard, and when she spoke, her voice was cold and final. "That's a very sad story," she said, and I could hear the unspoken but hanging in the air between us. "However, our policies are in place for a reason. We can't make exceptions just because someone tells us they have an emergency. Do you understand how many people would take advantage of that? How many sob stories we'd have to listen to every day? I'm sorry about your situation, truly I am, but I cannot allow you to use our facilities. Now please leave before I have security escort you out." The security guard was beside me now, his large hand reaching for my shoulder, and I wanted to scream, wanted to rage against the unfairness of it all, wanted to demand to know what kind of person puts policy above a human life. But I also knew that causing a scene wouldn't help my mother, wouldn't get me any closer to the help I desperately needed. Have you ever felt completely powerless? Have you ever been in a situation where the only thing standing between life and death was something so simple, so basic, as a phone call, but that simple thing was being denied to you? Comment below if you've ever experienced that kind of helplessness, because I want you to know that if you have, I understand. I understand what it feels like to be invisible, to be discarded, to be treated like your life and the lives of the people you love don't matter. But then something happened that I didn't expect. Something that changed everything in an instant. A voice calm and authoritative cut through the tension like a knife. "Patricia, what exactly is going on here?" I turned, along with everyone else in the lobby, to see a man in his 50s approaching the reception desk. He was tall and distinguished looking, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, wearing an expensive suit that somehow looked comfortable rather than stuffy, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Patricia Morrison's entire demeanor changed instantly, her rigid posture becoming even more rigid, her cold expression transforming into something that was trying very hard to be warm and professional. "Mr. Chen," she said, and I caught the slight tremor in her voice, the tone of someone addressing a superior. "I was just explaining to this young man that our phones are for hotel guests only. He came in off the street asking to use our facilities and as per our policy. But Mr. Chen held up a hand, silencing her mid-sentence, and turned his attention to me, his eyes taking in my appearance, not with disgust or disdain like Patricia Morrison had, but with something that looked like concern, like genuine human interest. "Young man," he said gently, crouching down slightly so we were at eye level, a gesture that immediately made me feel seen, feel human, feel like I mattered. "Tell me what's happening. Why do you need to use the phone?" And so I told him, the words tumbling out in a rush about my mother, about her condition, about the disconnected phone and broken payphones and absent neighbors, about running through the streets desperate for help, about standing in this lobby being told that policies were more important than people's lives. I told him everything, holding nothing back, because something in his eyes told me that he was actually listening, actually hearing me, actually caring about what I was saying. When I finished, there was a moment of silence, and then Mr. Chen stood up to his full height and looked at Patricia Morrison with an expression that made her face go pale. "Patricia," he said, his voice quiet but carrying an unmistakable edge of steel, "please explain to me why you were preventing this child from making an emergency phone call." Patricia Morrison opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again, her face flushing red as she stammered. "I was just following policy, Mr. Chen. We can't let just anyone use our facilities. It would set a bad precedent and—" But Mr. Chen cut her off again, his voice still quiet but now carrying a weight that made everyone in the lobby lean in to listen. "And what policy is more important than helping a child whose mother is in medical distress? What kind of hotel? What kind of establishment? What kind of people are we if we turn away someone in desperate need of help? What does it say about us, about our values, about our humanity, if we put rules and regulations above basic compassion and decency?" Patricia Morrison had no answer, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish out of water, her perfect facade cracking under the weight of her superior's disapproval and the stares of every guest and employee in that lobby. Mr. Chen turned back to me, his expression softening immediately, transforming from stern authority to gentle kindness in an instant. "Come with me," he said, gesturing toward the reception desk. "Use our phone. Call whoever you need to call. Take as long as you need, and please, don't worry about anything else right now except getting your mother the help she needs." I felt like I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what was happening because kindness, real kindness, especially when you're not used to it, can be just as overwhelming as cruelty. Mr. Chen guided me behind the reception desk, and I was acutely aware of Patricia Morrison standing there, her face a mixture of humiliation and resentment, but I couldn't focus on her anymore, couldn't let her matter, because my mother needed me. Mr. Chen picked up the desk phone, a sleek modern thing that looked like it cost more than everything my mother and I owned combined, and handed it to me, his hand steady and reassuring. "Take your time," he said again, and there was something in his voice, some quality that made me believe he genuinely meant it, that I wasn't an inconvenience or a problem, but a human being deserving of help. My hands were shaking so badly that I could barely dial. My fingers kept slipping on the buttons, and I had to start over twice before I got the numbers right. 911, 3 simple digits that represented help, that represented hope, that represented the possibility that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The emergency operator answered on the second ring, her voice professional and calm, and I tried to match her calmness as I explained the situation, gave her my address, described my mother's symptoms, answered her questions as clearly as I could even though my voice kept breaking and my tears kept falling. She assured me that an ambulance was being dispatched immediately, that help was on the way, that I had done the right thing by calling, and I felt some of the crushing weight on my chest begin to lift, just a little, just enough to let me breathe again. I thanked her, hung up the phone, and stood there for a moment trying to gather myself, trying to process what had just happened, trying to figure out what to do next. Mr. Chen was still there, standing patiently beside me, not rushing me, not making me feel like I needed to hurry up and leave now that I'd gotten what I came for. "Is someone going to be there when the ambulance arrives?" he asked, and I suddenly realized that I needed to get back home, needed to be there when the paramedics came, needed to see my mother, to hold her hand, to tell her that help was coming. "I need to go," I said, starting to move toward the lobby, toward the doors, toward home, but Mr. Chen's hand on my shoulder stopped me. "Wait," he said, pulling out his phone, a smartphone that probably cost more than 6 months of our rent, and within seconds he was giving instructions to someone on the other end. "I'm having my driver take you home," he explained, seeing my confused expression. "It'll be much faster than running, and you'll get there in time to meet the ambulance." I wanted to argue, wanted to say that I couldn't accept such kindness, that I didn't deserve it, that people like him didn't help people like me, but the words wouldn't come. And besides, he was already guiding me toward the hotel entrance where a sleek black car was pulling up, its driver jumping out to open the back door. "Go, Mr. Chen said, his hand gentle but firm on my back, guiding me toward the car. "Be with your mother. Make sure she gets the care she needs. And here," he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card along with several bills. Hundreds, multiple hundreds more money than I had ever held in my hands at one time. "Take this for the hospital bills, for whatever you need, and call me if there's anything else I can do to help." I stared at the money, at the card, at this man who was a complete stranger, but who had shown me more kindness in 5 minutes than most people had shown me in my entire life. And I couldn't speak, couldn't form words, could only nod as tears streamed down my face, tears of gratitude and relief and overwhelming emotion. The drive home took less than 5 minutes, a journey that would have taken me 20 minutes running. And when we pulled up to my building, the ambulance was just arriving, its lights flashing, its siren silent now that it had reached its destination. I bolted from the car, barely remembering to thank the driver, and raced up the 4 flights of stairs, my legs burning but refusing to slow down, and burst into our apartment to find the paramedics already there, already working on my mother, asking me questions about her medical history, about what had happened, treating me not like a kid but like someone whose input mattered, whose knowledge was important. My mother was loaded onto a stretcher, an oxygen mask over her face, an IV already in her arm, and as they carried her out, she reached for my hand, squeezed it weakly, and I saw relief in her eyes, saw that she knew help had come, that she was going to be okay. The next few days were a blur of hospital waiting rooms and doctor consultations and insurance paperwork that seemed designed to be as confusing and intimidating as possible. But thanks to Mr. Chen's money, we could afford the treatments my mother needed, could pay for the medications and the hospital stay and all the other expenses that would have been absolutely impossible for us otherwise. My mother's condition stabilized. The doctors explained that she had been suffering from severe pneumonia, complicated by malnutrition and exhaustion, that if I had waited even a few hours longer to get her help, if I hadn't fought so hard to make that phone call, the outcome might have been very different, might have been the nightmare scenario that had haunted my thoughts since I found her that morning. During those long hours in the hospital, I had a lot of time to think about what had happened at the Grand Riviera Hotel, about Patricia Morrison's cruelty and Mr. Chen's kindness, about how 2 people in the same place at the same time could have such vastly different reactions to the same situation. I thought about how close I had come to giving up, to walking away from that reception desk, to accepting that I didn't matter enough for anyone to help me, and what might have happened if I had. I thought about all the other kids like me, all the other people living on the margins of society, who faced similar situations, who needed help but were turned away, whose lives were deemed less valuable because they didn't have money, didn't have status, didn't look the right way or talk the right way or fit into the acceptable boxes that society had created. I thought about Patricia Morrison, about what kind of life experiences had shaped her into someone who could look at a desperate child and feel nothing, who could prioritize hotel policy over human suffering, who could sleep at night knowing she had refused help to someone in crisis. And I thought about Mr. Chen, about what had made him different, what had enabled him to see past my appearance, past my poverty, past all the superficial markers that society uses to judge worth, and recognize that I was just a human being who needed help. When my mother was well enough to talk, really talk, I told her everything that had happened, every detail of that morning, from finding her unconscious to standing in the hotel lobby to Mr. Chen's incredible kindness. She cried, which was rare for her. My mother was not someone who cried easily. Years of hardship had toughened her, had taught her to push through pain and keep moving forward no matter what. But this, the story of a stranger's compassion and her son's determination, broke through her defenses. "That man saved your mother's life," she said, holding my hand in both of hers, her grip weak but steady. "And you saved mine by not giving up, by being brave even when that woman tried to break your spirit. I'm so proud of you, baby, so incredibly proud." But I didn't feel brave. I felt lucky that Mr. Chen had appeared when he did. Lucky that my desperation had held out long enough for help to arrive. Lucky that the universe had aligned in just the right way to prevent the tragedy that had seemed inevitable. 3 days later, when my mother was released from the hospital with strict instructions to rest and a prescription for antibiotics and other medications that we could actually afford to fill thanks to Mr. Chen's generosity, I decided I needed to go back to the Grand Riviera Hotel, needed to thank him properly, needed to tell him what his kindness had meant, not just in practical terms, but in terms of what it had done for my soul, for my faith in humanity, for my belief that good people still existed in the world. I dressed in my cleanest clothes, which still weren't great, but were better than what I had been wearing that desperate morning, and I walked the 6 blocks back to the hotel, my heart pounding not with panic this time, but with nervous anticipation. The same doorman was there, and he looked at me with recognition, not stopping me this time, but actually holding the door open, nodding respectfully as I passed through. The lobby looked exactly the same, marble and crystal and luxury, but somehow it felt different, felt less intimidating, felt like a place I had earned the right to enter. Patricia Morrison was behind the reception desk, and when she saw me, her face went through a rapid series of expressions: recognition, embarrassment, resentment, fear, before settling on a carefully neutral professionalism. I walked up to the desk, and she immediately spoke before I could say anything. "Mr. Chen is expecting you," she said, her voice clipped and formal. "He left instructions that if you came back, I was to direct you to his office immediately. Top floor, executive suite. The elevator is to your right." I thanked her, keeping my voice polite but not warm, because I wasn't going to pretend that what she had done was okay, that her cruelty could be forgiven just because her boss had overruled her. Some wounds don't heal that quickly, and some lessons shouldn't be forgotten. The elevator ride to the top floor felt surreal, like I was in a movie or a dream. The elevator itself was nicer than most rooms I had been in, with mirrors and soft lighting and classical music playing quietly from hidden speakers. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway that screamed executive luxury: thick carpet, tasteful artwork, polished wood doors with brass nameplates, and at the end of the hall, a door marked Richard Chen, owner and CEO. Owner. The word hit me like a physical blow. Mr. Chen wasn't just an employee, wasn't just a manager or supervisor. He owned the entire hotel, owned the building I was standing in, owned the business that Patricia Morrison worked for, and suddenly his authority that morning made perfect sense. Suddenly I understood why one quiet word from him had been enough to override all of Patricia Morrison's policies and protests. I knocked on the door, heard a warm "come in" from inside, and pushed it open to find Mr. Chen sitting behind a large desk, papers spread out in front of him. But when he saw me, he immediately stood up, came around the desk, and greeted me not with a handshake but with a gentle hand on my shoulder, the gesture of someone checking on a friend rather than dealing with a visitor. "How's your mother?" he asked immediately before I could say anything else, and the genuine concern in his voice, the real worry I could see in his eyes, told me that this wasn't just polite small talk. He actually cared, actually wanted to know. I told him that she was home, that she was recovering, that the doctor said she would be okay with rest and proper care, that his money had made it possible for her to get the treatment she needed without us going into crushing debt that would have followed us for decades. "Thank you," I said, and the words felt inadequate, felt like they couldn't possibly convey the depth of my gratitude. Thank you for helping me, for seeing me when everyone else just wanted me to disappear, for treating me like I mattered. You saved my mother's life, and I don't know how I can ever repay you. Mr. Chen smiled, but it was a sad smile, the smile of someone who understood more than I realized, and he gestured for me to sit in one of the comfortable chairs near his desk. You don't owe me anything, he said, sitting in the chair beside me rather than behind his desk, a choice that felt significant, that eliminated the barrier of authority and created a sense of equality. But I do want to explain something to you. I want to tell you why I helped you, why I couldn't walk past that situation without intervening. He paused, his eyes distant, seeing something beyond the walls of his office, beyond the present moment. When I was about your age, he began, his voice soft with memory. My family and I came to this country as refugees. We had nothing, less than nothing actually, because we also had trauma, had memories of violence and loss, had watched our home country tear itself apart in war. My father was a doctor in China, a respected professional, but here his degrees meant nothing, his experience counted for nothing, and he ended up working in a factory, doing manual labor that broke his body and his spirit. My mother cleaned houses, took care of other people's children while barely seeing her own, worked herself to exhaustion just like your mother has. We lived in a tiny apartment in a neighborhood where gunshots at night were so common, we stopped flinching, where poverty and desperation created a cycle of violence and hopelessness that seemed impossible to escape. I listened, stunned, because the man sitting in this office wearing this expensive suit, owning this magnificent hotel, seemed so far removed from the story he was telling that it was hard to reconcile the two realities. One winter, he continued, my father got very sick, similar to your mother actually. Pneumonia complicated by exhaustion and malnutrition. And we had no money for a doctor, no insurance, no resources. I remember my mother crying, actually crying, which was something I had never seen before, and I knew we were in serious trouble. I ran to a nearby clinic, begged them to help us, but they turned us away because we couldn't pay, couldn't even make a down payment on what the treatment would cost. I went to 3 different places that day, each one turning me away, each rejection feeling like a death sentence for my father. Finally, I ended up at a hospital, and I did exactly what you did. I stood in their lobby, and I begged for help. And a doctor there, an older woman named Dr. Martinez, she listened to me. She came to our apartment. She treated my father. She saved his life, and she never asked for a single penny in payment. That act of kindness, that moment when someone with power and resources chose to help us rather than turn us away, that changed everything for my family, for my father, who recovered and eventually got recertified and started practicing medicine again, for me who learned that success comes with the responsibility to help others, to be the person who intervenes, who says no to policies that hurt people, who remembers what it was like to be powerless and desperate. Tears were streaming down my face now, silent tears that I didn't try to hide because this man, this successful, powerful man, understood, really understood, what it was like to be me, to be scared and desperate and invisible to most people. So you see, Mr. Chen said, reaching over to pat my shoulder gently, you don't owe me anything, because I'm just paying forward the kindness that was shown to me. I'm just being the person I needed someone to be when I was in your shoes. And honestly, thank you for giving me the opportunity to do that, for reminding me why I do what I do, why success and money and status mean nothing if they don't translate into making the world a little bit better, a little bit kinder, for people who need it most. We talked for over an hour, about life, about struggles, about dreams for the future, and when I finally left his office, I carried with me not just gratitude, but something more valuable, hope. Hope that people like me could make it, could climb out of poverty, could create better lives. Because if Mr. Chen could go from a refugee kid whose father worked in a factory to owning a successful hotel, then maybe, just maybe, anything was possible. Hope that kindness still existed in the world, that not everyone was like Patricia Morrison, that there were people who saw beyond surfaces to the humanity underneath. Hope that I could be that person too someday, that if I ever achieved success, ever found myself in a position of power or resources, I would remember this moment, would remember what it felt like to be desperate and scared and dismissed, and I would choose to be the person who helped, rather than the person who turned away. My mother and I's life didn't magically transform overnight. We still lived in the same tiny apartment, still struggled with bills and expenses, still navigated the challenges of poverty that don't disappear just because one person showed you kindness. But something fundamental had shifted, some belief in the possibility of better things, some understanding that we weren't alone, that there were people in the world who cared, who helped, who saw value in others regardless of their bank accounts or social status. Mr. Chen stayed in touch not in an intrusive way but in a way that let us know we mattered, that we weren't just a good deed checked off his list, but real people he cared about. He helped my mother find better work that paid more and didn't destroy her health, work that had benefits and reasonable hours. He helped me get into a better school, one where the teachers actually cared about their students, where I could learn and grow and prepare for a future that suddenly seemed bright with possibility. He became not just a benefactor but a mentor, someone I could call when I needed advice, someone who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself, someone who saw potential in a poor kid from the wrong side of town when most people saw nothing worth noticing. Years passed and I worked hard, studied hard, pushed myself to be worthy of the second chance I had been given, the chance that might not have existed if I had given up at that reception desk, if I had let Patricia Morrison's cruelty break my spirit, if Mr. Chen hadn't appeared at exactly the right moment. I got scholarships, went to college, pursued business like Mr. Chen had, learned everything I could about entrepreneurship and management and leadership. My mother's health improved with better working conditions and less stress, and watching her smile more, laugh more, relax more, was worth more than any amount of money could ever be. On the day I graduated from college, the first person in my family to earn a degree, Mr. Chen was there in the audience beside my mother, cheering as loud as any parent, his pride evident in his face, and I realized that he had given me something that went beyond money or opportunities. He had given me a new understanding of what it meant to be successful, what it meant to be a good person, what it meant to use whatever advantages you had to lift others up rather than push them down. I never forgot Patricia Morrison either, though my feelings about her evolved over the years from anger to something more like pity. I realized that people like her, people who built walls around their compassion, who prioritized rules over humanity, who couldn't see beyond surface appearances, were in some ways more trapped than I had ever been, trapped by their own limitations, their own fears, their own inability to connect with others in meaningful ways. I hoped that seeing what happened that day, seeing her boss override her cruel decision, seeing a kid she had dismissed go on to achieve things she probably never imagined possible, had taught her something, had cracked the wall around her heart even just a little bit. Whether it did or not, I'll never know, because some people change and some people don't. But I knew that I had changed, had been transformed by that experience in ways that would affect every decision I made for the rest of my life. Today, I run my own business, and while it's not as large or as successful as Mr. Chen's hotel empire, it's mine, built on principles he taught me, that success means nothing if it doesn't come with responsibility, that treating people with dignity and respect isn't optional, that policies and procedures should serve humanity, not the other way around, that you should always be the person who helps rather than the person who turns away. I have my own version of Patricia Morrison's reception desk now, countless moments where I have the power to help or hurt someone, to see them or dismiss them, to be kind or cruel, and every single time I remember that 14-year-old kid standing in a hotel lobby with tears in his eyes and desperation in his heart, and I choose kindness, always kindness, because I know what a difference it makes. I know what it feels like to be on both sides of that equation. Have you ever experienced a moment that completely changed your life? A moment when someone's kindness or cruelty altered your path forever? I want to hear your stories. I want to know that I'm not alone in having been shaped by these profound human interactions. So please share your experiences in the comments below. Tell me about the times when someone helped you when they didn't have to, or the times when someone's cruelty taught you how not to be. Because these stories matter. They connect us, they remind us that we're all in this together, navigating this complicated world where we have the power to make each other's lives better or worse with every choice we make. I want you to really understand something important here, something that goes beyond just this one story, beyond just my experience. The world is full of people who are struggling, who are desperate, who need help, but who look like they don't deserve it because of how they're dressed, because of where they live, because of the color of their skin, or the accent in their voice, or the amount of money in their bank account. Every single day, in hotels and restaurants and stores and offices all over the world, there are people like Patricia Morrison making decisions about who matters and who doesn't, who deserves compassion, and who deserves to be dismissed. And every single one of those decisions has real consequences. Life or death consequences sometimes, like it was for my mother and me. But there are also people like Mr. Chen, people who choose to see humanity first, who understand that policies and rules are meant to serve people, not the other way around, who remember what it was like to be vulnerable and scared, and who use their power and resources to help rather than to exclude. The difference between these two types of people isn't money or education or intelligence, it's empathy. It's the ability to imagine yourself in someone else's shoes, to feel what they feel, to understand that there, but for the grace of God go I, that any of us could be that desperate kid at the reception desk given different circumstances, different luck, different choices. So I'm asking you, begging you really, to be a Mr. Chen in this world, to be the person who helps when help is needed, who sees people when they feel invisible, who treats everyone with dignity regardless of their appearance or status. If you liked this story, if it touched your heart, if it made you think about how you treat others, then please hit that like button, because it tells me that these messages matter, that sharing stories about kindness and compassion and human connection is worthwhile. Subscribe to Through My Eyes for more true stories like this one. Stories about real people facing real challenges. Stories that remind us of our shared humanity and our capacity for both cruelty and extraordinary kindness. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new story, because each one carries lessons about life, about love, about what it means to be human in a world that too often forgets to value humanity. And most importantly, take this message with you when you leave here today. Carry it into every interaction you have, every moment when you have the power to help or hurt someone, and choose help, choose kindness, choose to be the person who makes a difference in someone else's life. Because you never know when you might be saving someone's world by simply choosing to see them, to hear them, to care about them. That phone call at the Grand Riviera Hotel didn't just save my mother's life, it saved mine too. Because it taught me that I mattered, that my life had value, that I was worth fighting for, and everyone, absolutely everyone, deserves to feel that way, deserves to know that they matter, that they're seen, that someone cares. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And I hope that the next time you see someone who looks like they don't belong, someone who's desperate or scared or asking for help, you'll remember this story and you'll choose to be their Mr. Chen. You'll choose to be the person who changes everything.